everybody. This is Ed Franklin with the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast. I appreciate you listening. If I don't tell you enough, I really do appreciate the listeners and you checking out my clips online has taken me over 20,000 views a month on Facebook and probably another, I don't know, 10,000 on TikTok. So I'm getting likes out there and I appreciate it. I mean, I need more likes, but I'm getting views. So, you can always get a hold of me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. And if you have an idea for a show or you have a guest or you want to be a guest, as long as it aligns with what I talk about on a regular basis. Of course, the show is called No Limits, so we can talk about anything we want. But you can always get a hold of me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com or contact me through social media. So I had put out on social media that I was looking for ideas for a podcast, and I got really no results. But someone had texted me a while back, and I had put out kind of the same note and they said, you should do one on fatherhood. Now, this has been a really complicated topic for me to come up with enough. Well, actually, I could probably do 6 shows on this because there's so much information and it's so subjective of what I think is a good father, what my uh, bringing up was with my father, what I did as a father. I mean, there's so much information. So I'm going to try to narrow this down into this podcast. And I think it'll kind of be fun, but it's just one of these topics that has so much information, and depending on who you are and how you were raised and how you raised your kids, um, there's just a lot of information. So let's get started. So the first thing I did when I decided to do this podcast was I looked up the definition of a fatherhood and definition of fatherhood, and what I found online was the state of being a father. That's about all. That's about the only definition. And we don't get a manual when we have children. We don't get a user's guide or anywhere to go to find out how to be a dad. We have watched dads as we were growing up. We usually had dads around. My dad wasn't around as much as as much as I was when I was a father, and maybe that's why I spent a little bit more time with my kids. But my dad had his own issues, and after he passed away when I was 19 years old. So after that, and prior to, I was very close to my mom, and we would discuss my dad quite a bit. And he had a lot of issues when he was growing up, and his father wasn't the model father. There's no model father as far as I'm concerned, unless it's on TV, I guess. So I didn't have to forgive him, but I understood his growing up and how he treated us. He didn't treat us poorly. He was pretty disciplined. I mean, I was the youngest of 4 kids, so I kind of looked at my brothers and sisters and said, "Yeah, I'm not going to do that." My dad doesn't think that's funny at all. So I kind of had a buffer. I got to watch and see where I could push my dad and where I couldn't. And I wasn't pushing him at all. I didn't really have any desire to push him on anything because he was that disciplinarian and he would not take an ounce of shit off of us kids. So I kind of learned, like I said, with my dad. He was always around when I played sports. He never missed a sporting event when I had that, and I appreciated that. I could always look up in the stands and see him there, and he was very encouraging, very direct, and he got me the tools I needed to practice a lot, and it made me a better athlete because he was behind me and kind of got he supported me in that aspect of my life. He was not. We didn't sit around and chum around and drink sodas together and things like that. I used to go with him a lot to places like the swap meet and his friend's house on his motorcycle, and that was this bonding thing. But we didn't really talk a lot. I mean, we'd talk about sports and things like that. But as far as getting down to the brass with you know talking, talking about life or anything, we didn't really have those conversations. And frankly, I don't think many kids did it when I grew up. So I'm a baby boomer. I was born in 1962. Just missed being a Gen X, but so we kind of all grew up in that same area. And in our household, there was no loving, kissing, hugging every 5 minutes, telling each other we love them and all that. We just played and we were just kids and we just had to do what we were expected to do. That meant go to school, help around the house when they asked. Although we didn't do a lot of that, my mom didn't make us do a lot of that. But let's talk about dads. So I became a dad on December 18th, 1986. Now it's been 40 years almost since I've had my first child, and I'm still raising kids. I have two grandkids at home, as most of you know. And it that day completely changed my life for the better. I started thinking more responsibly. I started taking things a little bit more serious. I was very much wanted to spend as much time as I could with my daughter at the time, and I had three kids within 5 years, so I spent a lot of time with all three of them. Now, I got divorced after 5 years and had to go to court for custody, and I was so angry that it just was that it was just going to end out that my ex-wife got the kids. Now, this isn't about divorce today or anything like that. I did fight pretty hard for my kids and got a lot of visitation. So again, spent a lot of time with them. Pretty much, if I wasn't at work, I was with them. If I had them for visitation, and I didn't miss any visitation, I had a lot. Even when I moved to Los, I had to move to Glendale for a little bit, and I still always came down and saw my children and took them to dinner or whatever, brought them back to LA, whatever the case was. So I really enjoyed spending time with the kids. They were fun, they were cute, we played a lot. We didn't have a lot of money to go do things, which I'll pepper in some advice for you dads out there throughout this thing. It's my opinion. And remember, everything in this podcast is my opinion. I'm not criticizing anybody else. I don't have anything to do with how other fathers raise their kids. That's not my intent of this at all. I think that the gentleman that suggested I talk about fatherhood probably suggested it because I have 8 kids now. So at the time, here's a little advice. I really found out that the kids did not necessarily want to go to Disneyland or Knott's Berry Farm or the zoo. All they wanted to do was be with me. And all I wanted to do was be with them. So if you're ever in this situation where, and I've given this advice to my children, just spend time with your kids. The time blows by. I am telling you. I feel like it was just a couple of years ago I was raising these children. Now they have their own families and they're raising children and they're doing a great job. After that, I got married again, had three more kids, three more daughters. So now I'm at 5 daughters and a son, and exactly the same thing. I'm spending a lot of time with them. Um, uh, we do stuff together. We're going to the beach. We do whatever, and spending a lot of time with them. And I felt a great joy when I was around my kids. In my promo for this, I said that fatherhood is not for the faint of heart because although there's also this labor of love, there's also a lot of stress and heartache and things like that going along with fatherhood, as most of you know, especially if you have raised kids up until they're 20 or 30, you know that there's some heartache mixed in there. And I can see that if my dad would have lived longer, I probably would have seen that same heartache in him. And so I think that it's a double-edged sword. It's and again, so subjective. Everybody has their different views and opinions and experiences with their children. And I would say as a whole, I had an awesome time with my kids. I miss them being small. I miss them being at home. I miss them um, you know, me communicating with them all the time. I communicate with a couple of my kids on a regular basis, but they're not here. They're not sitting across from me. And we have a much more open relationship as far as our conversations and things like that. And one of the things I've never done, I hope I haven't done this, and the kids would have to tell you, I've never pried into their life. My mom did not pry into my life. If they're having issues and they bring them up to me, I'm happy to talk with them about it and give them whatever advice I can offer. But I don't pry into their privacy. It's their business. They've made decisions that brought them to where they're at, and that's okay because they're all. Listen, I'm incredibly proud of all of my kids. Even if they're not doing all the things I want them to do, I'm still super proud of all my kids. Now, I told you I have 5 daughters and a son. When Kit and I got married, I got two more daughters, right? So they're stepdaughters, And I just really I never thought of them as stepdaughters. I just figured like they're just two more daughters. They kind of look like my kids. They all were around the same age, so they hung out with the younger ones, and they're all relatively close now. I mean, they communicate. I think all of them kind of communicate on a regular basis. I'm not positive about that. It's not my business. I don't talk to my siblings at all. I actually lost a sister a couple years ago that I was very close to years ago, and we kind of grew apart. And unfortunately, she passed away a couple of years ago, and I never had a chance to speak with her before she did. And that breaks my heart a little bit. But anyway, get back to the fatherhood thing. So here we are. Kit and I are married. The kids are going back and forth to their moms and dads, right? They're going back and forth visitation. And when they're there, they're doing fun stuff. They're going out. The parents are involved with them there. And we did all the sports things. When the kids were in junior high and high school, we had softball, we had water polo, excuse me, swimming, softball, basketball, soccer, lacrosse. We did all those things through high school, and it was rhetoric. But it was so fun because on the weekends, we'd go here and there, and I had one kid that played travel soccer, and we used to take the trailer there, and we'd have all of our things we had that we needed. We had a daughter that we found out when she was 11 that she had type 1 diabetes, that she was a type 1 diabetic. So we had the trailer for insulin and food and all those things. We did the going back and forth. Hey, I'll meet you at this sport. You go to that sport, and I'll go to this sport. And it was just really a chaos, but it was organized chaos at some level. What I miss about the kids, let me back up. So when they were in elementary school, my five younger ones, I started a dad's club with a friend of mine. There was another dad, and we kind of felt like I definitely felt like this because of going through a divorce that um, dads were kind of second nature citizens, right? The mom was always the most important one, and the dad just was just the guy that mowed the lawn and washed cars or whatever. But since I wasn't married to their mom, I wanted to spend again as much time as I could with them. And they went to school locally, so I would go see my older kids. There's kind of two sets of kids, if you get my gist here. So we started a dad's club at Garden Road School, and what the idea of that club was that most of the time at that time the PTA members were women, and they were the ones that were like the room moms, and they would do this and that. And I used to go read to my kids' classes when I had a chance. I was in sales, so I had a kind of an open schedule, and I could go read to their class. I coached basketball in one of their classes, or taught basketball, whatever you want to call it. So my buddy and I started this dad's club, and the whole idea was to get dads to come to the school, get dads' presence on the campus. And we would do things like we called it Donors with Dads. And the dads would bring their daughters, and we would, or sons, either one, and they would bring their kids to the auditorium, and we'd have donuts, and they had coffee and juice, and we'd get local places to donate stuff. There's a walk to school day. We used to get bananas from Stater Brothers and juice boxes and whatever we could get ourselves involved with. And the whole idea was there was no women involved in a dad's club, right? It was nothing against women. It was just the fact that we wanted to get dads on present at the school. If there was a situation where there was a child who didn't have a father in the picture or they couldn't make it, dads would adopt that child for the day. So we used to have this little gal named Megan. She used to come with us when we went for Donuts with Dad. She would come with our group of kids, our group of daughters. I had all five daughters in the school. And it was really a great organization. And we raised funds, and everybody donated money. We didn't have to ask the PTA for money or anything like that. And we just had all these events. And when if they had a like end of school party, we'd make food, and we'd get involved in the carnivals and do all this stuff. And it was just really this great experience. And again, an opportunity for us to be with our kids. And the principal was really cool about it. He used to come before he'd go surfing on Saturdays. He'd come to a meeting if we had one. and we would, get permission from him to do this event or that event. And he was always very kind about that, and just kind of let us do as long as he knew what was going on. Years down the road, the person I started with, his wife was the PTA president, and she really wanted this to be part of the PTA, and I did not. I just wanted to stay by ourselves and just do the things we were going to keep doing. But they had a vote, and it went to fly into the PTA. So what that did to the club, and it's when I left the club, is now it was, instead of being donuts with dads, it was, donuts with parents. And then we used to have a dads with at lunch. The dads could bring a lunch to school and have lunch with their children. Then it became parents with lunch or for lunch or whatever. And it kind of ruined the whole idea of it. It was to get those dads in on campus, right? So now it didn't. Now again, I felt like the fathers were being, kind of second class citizens. It wasn't about them anymore, and it should have been. That was the whole idea of it. We weren't taking anything away from women or grandparents or anything. We were adding to the experience for the kids. And I've always had that attitude. Men are just as important as women, excuse me, as parents. They have their own, they bring their own talent, they bring their own skills, they bring their own ways of raising kids to the table, just like moms do. Now, understanding, especially after having 7 daughters now and a mom and a wife and all these things, there's a different relationship kids have with their mom. No doubt about it. There's more of an emotional bonding thing. I mean, they came out of their body. There's a whole thing, but there's also a special relationship, especially daughters have, well, no, daughters and sons that they have with their dad. And I just think the parents are equally as important in the relationship. And my mom told me one time, and I think a priest told her this, two things that she told me. She says, look, when you're raising kids, and I didn't have kids yet, she said, say no as few times as possible, right? They're going to ask you a lot of things. Try to say no. Try not to say no all the time. Say it as little as possible. And you better have a good reason why you're saying no. If you can't come up with a good reason, then why shouldn't it be yes? And there was a few things my parents let me do that a lot of parents would not have let me do because they really didn't have a good reason why I couldn't do it. I was a responsible kid, especially as a teenager. I had a job. I had my own car. I had all those things. So I did a lot more things as a teenager than other kids were allowed to do. I had a little bit more freedom and plus I was a guy, I had two sisters that were probably on a little shorter leash, but and I'm not small. I mean, I was just, it was, I'm just saying that for safety reasons. Like there was not, they couldn't really come up. The other thing she said to me, and she said a priest told her this too, that if the mom and dad nurture their relationship and stay close and do all the right things in their marriage, and now the right things again is subjective. I don't know what your relationship's like with your spouse, but if you're doing all those right things, the kids will watch that and it'll make life a lot easier with the kids. They'll see how the dad respects the mom. They'll see how the mom respects the dad. They'll know what the expectations of each of them are, and that's important for those kids' relationship when they get older. Now, my parents, I come from a broken, they got divorced and they got remarried, and it's a whole kind of a mess. So I did not learn from them how to be married. Probably my stepdad taught me a lot more about, that closeness with your wife and things like that. And again, when I tell you that we did a lot of things as a family with other families, we went camping, we went to parties, we weren't, we were a party when we showed up. I mean, here, if all my kids were with me, 10 of us would show up to a party, to a birthday party, and double the amount of party. And it was good, right? It was good for the people that were there, and the kids got to interact with other kids and swim and do whatever they were doing. And there were certain things I didn't allow my kids to do at those parties. They were all very polite. There's nothing better than going to a restaurant or a party or something and having people tell you, look, your kids are really well behaved. That was always awesome. And so, we were, and I'm not criticizing the other parents. They had their own beliefs, their own deal, however they treated their kids, the way they talked around them. I was not the parent that didn't cuss. I was the cusser. So, and people would look at me sometimes like I cussed in front of my kids. Well, I did. I don't know if that was the best practice. Obviously, it probably wasn't, but it was who I am, and it's what they got. Now, with all that being said, that's all the good stuff, right? When we got a little bit further into teenage years, there was some different situations that happened into and around us that put some stress on the kids, right? Um, could have been, and I'm not going to enumerate them, but there was just other things that were going on, maybe with their other parent, maybe with this person or that person, or maybe now they had a boyfriend, or maybe, whatever the case was. And they didn't really lash out behavior wise, but it was definitely put a little bit more stress on me as a father. And I've had to become a lot more open minded to things. So I'm pretty conservative, a lot more conservative when I was younger than what I am now, or what I was as the kids were getting a little bit older. I had to be a little bit less stringent with kids, and kind of my ideas just in general. My hat's like crooked here. So, um, and then as they were progressing through high school, we had a couple kids that did some stupid shit that we had to deal with, and a couple incidents with the police. I won't get into those, but and nothing really serious, just some things that, kids will be kids kind of thing. A couple parties that I didn't know what they were doing at the party, and we found out, and that's when the police showed up. Thank God everybody was safe, no one got hurt, but there was definitely some incidents where I had to go call out other parents and go, look, you're a dumbass. You kind of let these kids get out of control, and you should have had kept a better eye on things. Now, I have some parents, friends of mine that have kids that all four of them went to college. There's a particular family. I'm not going to say much about them because I don't want to know who I'm talking about. And they just looked like, Leave It to Beaver. Like there was the perfect family. And they still, to this day, and listen, they're not lying. These people are that sweet of people. They're that kind of people. And they went to college, and they had this a better plan than I had when I was raising kids. I was just kind of had kids, and I was going to raise them, right? I was going to go to work, try to get as much money, make as much money as I can so they can have the things maybe I didn't have, and maybe we could do some things that I didn't get to do with my parents. And of course, like I said, my dad died when I was 19. So I wanted to be around my kids as long as I could be. So the reason I bring that up is when I talked about how subjective it is with parenting, some people are going to listen to this and they may know one or two of my kids and go, "Oh yeah, that's why they're like that." Or they might say, "Oh man, I know his daughter kills it, and that's why she's like it because of Ed." That's not the case at all, and I would never sit here and take credit for that. My kids are like society, right? We have some really high achievers, some kids that are in the middle, and some kids that are still trying to kind of find their way. My youngest is 29 years old, and I've said before we have 20 grandchildren, so the kids have a lot of kids, and the way they're raising their kids compared to the way is very different than the way I raised my kids. I'm not criticizing them. I'm not saying my way was right and their way was wrong. I'm not saying my friends were doing the right way and I was doing it wrong, or vice versa. This is why this conversation could go on for hours of how we are as fathers. Like I said, you don't get a manual. There's a lot of kids out there that don't have dads around, and that's a sad thing. And the mom has to step up and kind of act like both parents, and it's hard for them. One of my daughters was a single mom for a while. She kind of had to do both jobs, and that's not easy because they really can't be as efficient as they need to be. They're awesome parents. They're awesome moms. My son is an incredible dad. He has 6 children and he spends so much time with these kids, and I'm so happy for that. And that's my advice to them all the time is just spend as much time as you can with them. Oftentimes when the kids were younger, they would call me and ask me for advice. It could have been about work, it could have been about anything. And I would say to them, you have kids. If your kids came and asked you this question, what would you tell them? And I remember my daughter asked me, she goes, well, I tell them this and that. And I said, well, there's your answer for yourself, right? Because you're never going to do something to steer your kids wrong. And I didn't either. Did everything in my life work out? No. Am I the perfect dad? Oh my God. No way. I'm not even close to the perfect dad. I think I fed my kids. I got them taken. They always had a roof over their head. They had some fun. I have my own problems that they had to deal with, whether, whatever those are. My wife has them. I mean, we all have these things, and there's just, again, there's no user's manual to figure out what a good parent is. The Catholic Church, when you get married, you have to take you have to take classes. They used to call them pre-Cana classes. I think they're called, pre-marriage. I don't even know what they're called anymore. And I had to take them with my first wife, and I had to take them with Kit. And by the time the one I took with my first wife was a joke, and then when finally after I'd been, married twice, we had to do it again because I got an annulment to get married to Kit in the Catholic Church. And now it's a real joke because now I have experience that these people teaching have no experience about. It's kind of like a priest giving you advice on being married that's never been married. And oddly enough, there's a priest at St. Gabriel's that was married and was in the Navy for like 20 years, and his wife passed away, and he had 2 kids, and he became a priest. So he had been married, so he had a very different perspective on marriage than the other priests did because he had done it, and it was always kind of refreshing to hear him talk about that and kids and kind of talk about kids and things. But I watch some parents. I can tell you that parents are very different now. And when I go to pick up Piper at um, Maranatha, most of the parents are my kids' age, right? I'm probably one of the oldest people there when I go to get her. And everybody knows I'm her grandfather, and there's some other grandparents that pick up their kids. But I'm mostly watching parents, young kids, young women, young men. And just like generation is different, but parents are different. And you can see how they talk to their kids and how they treat them. And uh, I just never talk to my kids the way they talk to their kids, and it's not bad. They're being very kind, being maybe over kind, and so Piper gets kind of a different perspective of how her friends are treated versus how we treat her. Now we don't treat them bad, and they don't treat their kids bad. It's just very different. More old school ideas that come out of our mouth, obviously, because we're old school, versus what they're doing. And I want to back up for a minute. That Dad's Club is still going. In fact, a couple of years ago, I did a podcast with the other founder, and the new president or whatever they call him, the leader of the Dad's Club. And we did about an hour podcast and talked about some of the things we were doing. We kind of told him how it grew organically from what we did, and it's funny. The other founder, said to me, I regret doing what you asked me not to do, and that was getting it back involved with the PTA. PTA aren't bad. I have my own opinions about the PTA. I have my own opinions about everything you guys don't really want to hear. But I had my own opinions about the PTA at the time, and my parents were involved when I was a kid, but it was different I when I had kids in school. So the Dad's Club is still thriving, and they're doing lots of things. And they started more Dad's Clubs. We used to get calls from other schools that asked us how we started it. We were in the paper. They came and reported on what we did. Mostly the other guy because I don't care about publicity, but um, it was a good thing. And I see a lot more dads at school than I would have probably 20 years ago now. And that could be because they work out of the house. I don't know what the reasons being is, but um, it's refreshing. It's nice to see a lot of these dads that are really involved with their kids. And it should keep staying that way. I mean, listen, I know I've met thousands of people in my life and thousands of people that were fathers, and we all have our own styles. We all have our own way of doing things. We all come from different backgrounds. We were all raised different. And you can definitely see the difference in, how people have relationships with their parents now. So none of my parents are alive. My father passed away, my mother passed away, and my stepdad passed away. And I was very close to my mom, like I said, and my stepdad, we were very close. In fact, my mom passed away in 97. Um, he moved in with us eventually and ultimately passed away. But I'll tell you a funny thing about him. So he was born in 1923. And so his kids were older than I was. And let me tell you about his when he raised kids. He was a very strict father. He was in the Navy for 20 years. He used to say that he wouldn't allow his kids to wear dungarees. For those of you who don't know, those are jeans. They could not wear jeans to school. They had to wear slacks. Versus me, who used to wear board shorts and a t-shirt and Vans to school. My dad and mom never had, but they were not very strict when it came to that. We didn't go to church. We didn't pray before eating. We didn't do any of that. All my kids went to church their whole entire time they were with us. Something I really miss. Here's a little bit more of one of my tips for being a good parent, in my opinion. Again, all my opinion. We would sit down for dinner, and even if we just had six kids there, because at one time we had six daughters living with us. My son and my other daughter lived with their mom up in Inland Empire, and we would eat dinner, sit down, say our prayer. Nobody ate, took a bite until we all started dinner. And after dinner, the kids would usually clear the table, but we'd sit there, and it could be up to an hour. We would just sit there and talk, right? Talk about their day, talk about um, whatever they wanted to talk about. One of Kit's daughters, her youngest daughter, can tell stories like you've never back then, like you can't believe she could tell stories. And we would laugh and listen to her tell stories. We would tell jokes. We would talk about. They'd ask me questions about life, and ask Kit questions about life and things like that. And we would have these wonderful conversations. And I miss that terribly because I just miss that interaction with my kids all the time. Shit, by the time they started moving out and having kids and everything, it just seemed like a snap of the fingers and they were all gone, just about, right? And now almost all of them are married and they all have children. Every one of my kids has a child or more. And I really miss that. I miss that time with the kids. So I drove my kids to high school for 13 years. They weren't in high school for 13 years. We had an older one and we had a younger one. So I would take the kids to school in the morning, along with the kids in the block in the neighborhood. I always had a couple extra kids there. And that lasted for like 13 years. And then Kit would pick them up and then she'd work the rest of the day from home. So I had these moments every morning, during school where I had them for 10 or 15 minutes. And those are really valuable times to have with your kids where you could talk about anything. And one of the kids, the neighbors would bring something up or whatever, and we'd get in a conversation, and I'd drop them off, and then back next day we'd be sitting there again. We had one young man that used to come up from the corner that would ride with us to school, and he and I would sit in the car waiting on girls. And then the whole time they're, on the way to school, they're doing their makeup and chatting and doing all these things. So these are these really valuable times that if you are a father, do not pass up these times. Make time for this communication because it will end quickly. And I know I was looking at the demographics on who listens to my podcast, and most of your kids are all grown. You're like my age, so my demographics is way up there in my area. But I'm telling you, if you have children or if you're going to have children, do everything you can to spend as much time with them because it goes by like a flash of lightning. And now I only have a few grandkids in California. I have some in Texas. I have some in Northern California. I have some in Louisiana, and then kids up in the Inland Empire. So I don't get to see them on a regular basis, and it's hard not to see them and chat with them. And even when we do get together now, it's kind of it'd be a holiday or something or a birthday party, and there's not as much chance to sit there and kind of converse with them. So that's something that I think is really super important. Your kids want to talk to you. You may have some relationships that are strained. I do, with my kids. And those are kind of cyclical. They'll come back around. I'm not really concerned about it. I could be the problem. I've been the problem in other relationships. It's not beyond me to not be perfect, and I don't expect any of you are either. I know that there's things I would watch parents do and say, I'll never do that with my kids. But again, it's their prerogative, it's their religion, it's their whatever they decided to do, with their kids. And there's no right way, there's no wrong way to do it. Well, there's wrong ways to do stuff, but there's really no right way. Communication's key. Not all of my kids went to college. Other families I know, every kid went to college. I never really paid. I donated some money to my kids to go to school, but not much. And maybe books and things like that. If they wanted to follow that, they would do that on their own. And I can tell you this, none of my kids went to college and drank all the time. Not that anybody else's kids do that either, but somebody's doing it because I see them on TikTok all the time. I just was not going to pay for them to go party. If they wanted something bad enough, they'll get it on their own. I did it. My kids did it too. Um, and like I said, I have some very successful kids, some kids that are still trying to figure things out, and that's all right. It's okay. That's not. It's really not my job to make sure they succeed. It's my job to give them the tools, and then they need to do what they want with them. And I'll bet you that statement right there is going to be the biggest backlash I get. To just say that it's not my job. I didn't cut my kids off when they were 18 and say, I'm not your parent anymore. But they made some decisions that were indicative of them deciding they were going to do what they were going to do, whether I had an opinion about it or not. Um, and they probably don't even know my opinion. I've told kids how I felt about things, and that didn't always go over well. If they asked me a question today and I told them I'll tell them how I feel, and if they don't like it, there's not much I can do about it. Society gets a hold of your children, believe me, and it will poison them with things. In my opinion, again, they could look at it as that I'm the one that's closed-minded or poisoned, but that's not always the case. Just saying. So anyway, like I said, this could have been I could have done 6 podcasts on this and just clipped out pieces of things that had happened. I could tell stories, like I could tell stories for an hour and a half about my kids. I guess overall, all I would want to say about it is that I'm completely blessed that I have 8 children. I'm completely blessed that I have 20 grandchildren. My wife and I's relationship is intact. Everything's good. Um, whatever challenges I'm facing in life, I'll get by. And my challenges are not my kids' challenges. I can tell you that. That is, my problems are not my kids' problems. And frankly, their problems aren't mine either. They knew if they made a bad decision in their life, they knew what they were doing. Or it was just bad timing. I mean, I made some decisions that I felt like I had all the information I should have had, and lo and behold, something happened, and it turns out not to be a great decision. I got news for you. I don't care if you have kids or not. That shit's going to happen to you, where you're going to gamble a little bit or something, and it's not going to work out, and that's just part of life. But like I said, we raised 8 kids in California, and their moms were helped, and their dads helped, and we kind of all raised these kids together, and they have uh, particular kids have particular personality traits from us. The times are different, technology's different, everything's different, and society has completely been flipped upside down, in my opinion, because of my age, from what I remember society being. It's always funny. I always tell people that there's always 2 sides to it. There's always 3 sides to a story. There's way left, way right, and then the truth usually falls in the middle somewhere. When we were kids, the biggest difference is we didn't have all this information technology, right? We couldn't go online and find out things. The government was still doing the same thing they're doing to you today. They just didn't have to tell you. We just didn't know. It's just out there now. And we didn't have as much I don't want to call it fake news. We didn't have as much stuff that was made up. It's funny with this AI now, you can go online and they'll have, President Clinton making a speech. It's not even him, it's just an AI character that they made and they use his voice and all those things. So I would tell you when that piece comes, you're going to have to give your kids some good information, and they're not going to like it all the time, but that's all you can do is all you can do. You can give them the information that you've learned. You can give them experience that you've had. I've said this before. My son one day came and asked me my opinion about something, and I gave him my opinion. About a week later, he came back and says, "Hey, I talked to this other guy, and he told me this about the question I asked you." And I said, "Well, what's funny is I gave you the same answer. You just didn't listen to when I said it. Sometimes that's going to happen. And you have to be very patient and you just have to kind of wait and see what happens and see how your kids turn out. And like I said, I know if you're one of my listeners, you have perfect kids just like me. So you're not going to have any issues with that. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on fatherhood. I know I could have gotten a lot deeper. We could have talked about 100 other things. If you ever want to get on my podcast and talk to me about fatherhood and give me your opinion, or motherhood and give me your opinion, I'd be happy to entertain that. I think that might be fun to have a collaborative thing. And I hang out with these two guys. They've both been, or one of them's been on my podcast, John Riley, and they had very different upbringings than I had. And I can see that they parented their kids very different than I did. I was a little more iron fisted with my kids. They're a little more relaxed, but and some of my kids have degrees and some of them don't. And their kids do, and whatever. It was just, and they have degrees. I do not have a degree. I kind of learned, from the school of hard knocks, if you want to call it that way. So listen, we're all different. We're Parenting is like DNA, man. It's all different, and it's all depends on, you know, personalities that after all these kids and to get them together in one room and all the different personalities blows me away. Like their opinions about politics or just about anything in the world are so different. And I know it wasn't what I told them because I would have told them differently than that. But that's just life. And they, like I said, they get with society and they they learn a lot of different things. They adapt a lot of different ideals and things like that. And I talk to you in my podcast about being told what you can and can't do in life. And sometimes I have some kids that take that to heart. Some kids that just blow it off and know that it's bullshit. So I'm looking at my notes over here, and understanding behavior was really interesting. It was like going to psychiatric school for all these years having kids because they would all act out differently in different situations. They all learn differently. Some of them were very visual, some of them were very auditory. It just depended on the kid, and you got to figure all that out at a quick rate when you're raising your kids because, like I said, they grow up really fast. But anyway, I appreciate you listening to my podcast. I know I don't tell you that enough, and I hope this podcast adds something to your life if you have kids or if you have grandkids. And maybe I said something that reminded you of something that you could tell your kids. I love my children like more than anything in the world, and I wish that it was all roses and ice cream and all those fun things all the time, but it's just not. And I think we're called to do that. If you're religious at all, you were called to procreate. And I think that I kind of went overboard. Maybe I could have had two kids instead. Just kidding. I wouldn't know which ones to take. But anyway, like I said, this is the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast. If you want to get a hold of me, it's edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. You can always get a hold of me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you want, wherever I'll be. I might do another podcast this week or maybe early next week about some other topics, but I thought this one would be a good one, although it was very difficult to figure out and kind of figure out what I want to talk about. I know I rambled a lot and just kind of probably didn't give you much information about what it was like when when the kids were growing up, but I can tell you that I miss it terribly, and I wish it would have gone slower. But we are where we are, and that's it. So have a great summer. Beautiful day in San Diego today, and I will talk to all of you soon.